summer of the year 2013, after decades of denial, the US government would finally openly admit the existence of a location fueled by a plethora of stories and anecdotes. Area 51, a topic that has given us plenty to talk about over several decades. Today's story is one that perhaps you've never heard of, a story with a sinister undertone, something that came to be known as one of the most incredible human experiments in history. This is the Abigail Project. We begin in the year 1943. Back then, the enormous governmental facility operated in the Indian Springs, but rumors that the place was more than just a runway began spreading through the state and eventually the rest of the world. Media, as well as regular citizens, began trying to infiltrate the area to gather more information, but security was heavily enforced. What was it that the government was trying so hard to protect? Looking on from a distance, private investigators hired by media companies managed to identify several employees. These were then paid to speak. All these men mentioned one name in common: Abigail Wester. Abigail Wester. She was the daughter of one of the most respected commanders, Mr. Albert Wester. By then, the Second World War had already begun, and even though the US was eventually victorious, it required the help of several powerhouses to defeat the Nazis. Some believed that part of Hitler's success came from all of his experiments over the population on his quest to build the strongest and most powerful soldiers. The US did not want to stay behind. Albert would go on to offer his daughter to take part in this experiment. Syringes, vials, and surgery tools were ready for what came to be known as the Abigail Project. Albert was advised by his peers to not go through with it, but he refused. Abigail's facial bone structure began deforming, her teeth grew out of proportion, and her skin went from young to old and decrepit. Loss of hair eventually came along, but even then, her father pushed on. His love for science outweighed that for his daughter. Area 51 reports revealed that large quantities of food were being brought onto the location to feed one of their test subjects. These same employees reported a humanoid creature being locked inside of a laboratory. Her now elongated bones and unexisting human consciousness had turned the girl into a monster. Albert was eventually overwhelmed by the guilt from his actions over his daughter. Only 2 years after starting the experiment, the doctor would eventually take his own life. Behind, the commander left a note to other employees begging them to please look out for his daughter, but they refused. It was reported that negligence pushed Abigail over the edge. In a fit of rage, she mauled 2 government employees, which pushed the military to quarantine her in the west wing of Area 51. This area continues to be protected, and it has never been reopened due to fear of what exactly lies behind its walls. The story of the Abigail experiment.